that the Catholic Church can kiss my behind, and I'm Catholic. So I've got a two-part story here to tell you, or really two stories to tell you that are hopefully will paint this picture as to why. So first, a little background. I born and raised Catholic up in Norway, Michigan, in the Upper Peninsula, almost by Canada. So that's where I was born and raised. Went to a K through 8 Catholic school. I went to a Catholic college. All through my youth, I was an altar server and did all that stuff as a kid, and even into college a little bit and everything. So my parents and us, we weren't like ultra religious or anything, but we were part of the Catholic Church, and we went to church on most Saturdays or Sundays, and, you know, said prayers before most meals and said prayers before most bedtimes, that kind of thing. So I think it was fairly balanced where faith and religion was definitely a part of our house and a part of our family, but I never felt as a kid that it was being shoved down my throat. So I always had what I thought was a pretty decent relationship with the Catholic Church or with religion or whatever. So fast forward to I'm in my, early 30s, and my wife and I are engaged, and we are looking to get married. And we got engaged in November, and we were looking to get married just a month later in December. And all we were looking for really was just a ceremony. And the reason that we were looking to expedite this was because my father had been sick with cancer, and we were kind of unsure how long he was going to be, healthy enough or alive to attend a wedding. So we thought, hey, what if we just did like a super small ceremony, just our immediate family, just so my dad had that experience of seeing his son get married, and we had that celebration. And then a year or so later, we would sort of plan our actual or real, wedding, which is what we ended up doing. And that was a year down the road. So we weren't looking to, hurry up and elope and tie the knot and do all that nonsense, but we were trying to do that to make sure that my dad could experience that while he was alive and healthy enough to do it. So we had both lived separately in the Dallas area for about 10 years each, almost by that point. So we had on and off gone to church, and, I was kind of living with roommates or living on my own and in my mid-20s, and, going out and drinking and doing all that stuff was more important to me than doing a lot of church. But I still managed to go to church, I'd say maybe once or twice a month. And Beth and I, my wife, we went a few times and everything. But as a lot of people do, if you live in a city for a long time and you're younger, you tend to move around to different apartments as the one you're in becomes too expensive or whatever. So I had lived, in this part of town and that part of town and the outskirts of town, that kind of thing. So a lot of times if I was still going to church, or when I was still going to church, or when Beth and I would go together, that we would just sort of find whatever one was closest to us for that day or whatever, wherever we lived at that time in our tenure. So I never had like a home-based church in Dallas. So the reason I say that is because when I went to talk to the Catholic Church and explain our situation and ask about getting married, I guess I was naive and didn't realize this, but I was told by 6 or 7 different priests at 6 or 7 different Catholic churches that I had been to in the DFW area over the years that they would not marry us because we had not been at a particular church for at least 6 months to a year. And then on top of that, we had to go through a 6 to 8 week long marriage kind of boot camp or whatever in order to be approved by the Catholic Church. So I really tried to plead with them. I explained the situation about my father, and that really, really bothered me because I felt like our intentions were good. We had been dating for a couple of years, and we were engaged, and this was not a rush job. We were both in our 30s, so like we had spent the time going into this where we were committed and we knew we were making a long-term decision. And that coupled with the fact that my dad was sick and we were trying to at least provide him with that experience, that the Catholic Church was unwilling to do that. So we said, all right. So we ended up finding a minister in a different religion. I think it was Lutheran, and they married us in a church the December 27th, the day after my dad's birthday. And my parents were there, Beth's family was there, and we just had a 30-minute quick ceremony and went out for pizza afterwards. But at the end of that really bothered me that I felt like our intentions were pure. And given the unique circumstance and given the fact that I had been a lifelong practicing Catholic and had education background and altar serving background and all those things, so did my wife, that they would be inclined to, to work with us to do something, even if it wasn't something that was, formalized or something, just some sort of a mock ceremony or something, so that my dad could experience that. And they wouldn't budge. So that really bothered me for a while. And years later, my wife and I had our daughter, and we decided to get her baptized. And we went to get her baptized in the Catholic Church. And we found out that because we were not technically married in the Catholic Church, that we could not baptize our daughter yet. So even though we had a legal marriage and it was faith-based and we were inside of a church, because it wasn't a Catholic church, we were not allowed to baptize our daughter until we got married in the Catholic Church. So we had the ceremony with my dad. Then a year later, we had that same pastor or minister kind of do another marry of us with all of our friends and family at our quote unquote wedding. And now we had to get married for a third time in order to get our daughter baptized. So that really bothered us as well. And then on top of that, we had already been married for 6 years, that we had to go through that Catholic marriage boot camp where we had to get assigned a mentoring couple, and then they had to coach us through this 6 or 8 week long program before we could do the baptism. So 2 examples here, feeling like, man, we are really having to go the extra mile here for 2 practicing Catholics, lifelong Catholics. Intentions are pure. All we want to do is just keep moving forward with our life. And we were kind of getting, the metaphorical middle finger from the Catholic Church. I understand they have rules and all that stuff in place, but it brings me to something which we'll talk about in a minute. So we had to go through this marriage boot camp thing. And I remember we went to this couple's house, and they were probably 10, 15 years older than us. And they sat down and they started this questionnaire or whatever. It started the process. And they said, how do you two handle when you have to pay the bills? How do you handle that? And it was just like crickets. And my wife and I were looking at each other, and we're like, we told them, like, hey, we've been married 6 years. Like we have all this stuff down. And they're like, well, what do you do if you want to be intimate with each other? And again, we're like looking at each other. like, well, this is designed for like younger people that are like 19 or 20 when they're getting married. We're like, look, we're in our mid-30s. Okay, we have a 2-year-old kid. Like, can we just move this along, please? So we had to go through that, and then we got married. We had to have a marriage ceremony in the Catholic Church. And then after that, then we could have a baptism in the Catholic Church. So those 2 examples, long-winded here, but those 2 examples to me really reframed my perspective on the Catholic Church and the whole experience. And it taught me a valuable lesson.